Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, above climate change, and things adjacent. Please remember to like the video and to make that sure that you are subscribed. Still subscribed. So I want to cover this. I didn't get a chance to cover this last week. It's from January 15th. And what happened was an airplane did an emergency landing, and they dumped a bunch of fuel just all over LA. This actually happens. This happens in air travel, that sometimes a plane is forced to dump its fuel. However, usually they're in a place where they can dump it over like land or the ocean or somewhere where it's not going to affect people. But LAX, the way it sits, and the way the air traffic is directed straight over the city, so. This airplane, I guess, was forced to dump its fuel, and it dumped it onto school children, basically. So let's go through this. Delta flight did not notify air traffic control before Los Angeles fuel dump. Planes do dump jet fuel in emergency landings, but this one flew at a low altitude over a populated area, affecting nearly 60 children and adults. A Delta Airlines flight crew did not notify air traffic control Tuesday before dumping jet fuel over a portion of Los Angeles County that included several schools where children were playing outside, according to federal officials. Delta Flight 89 was on its way from Los Angeles to Shanghai when it needed to turn around due to mechanical issues. On its way back to the airport, the plane released jet fuel at a low altitude to lighten its load, causing minor injuries to dozens of students and staff who were outside as it flew overhead. Air crews will typically notify air traffic control of an emergency landing and indicate that they need to dump fuel, the Federal Aviation Administration said Wednesday of the procedure. Airplanes sometimes used to reach a safe landing weight. Air traffic controllers will then direct the plane to the appropriate fuel dumping area. But a review of communications with air traffic controllers revealed that the airline crew did not tell air traffic control that they needed to dump fuel, according to the FAA. Los Angeles Times obtained a recording of the communications from liveatc.net, which archives air traffic control audio. We have an emergency at this time. We need to return to LAX for an engine compressor stall. The pilot can be heard saying in the recording. A controller asks whether the pilot needs to immediately return to the airport or to hold to burn fuel. The pilot replies that he's got it back under control and will turn back around to the airport. Okay, so you don't need to hold to dump fuel or anything like that. The controller asks the pilot, who responds negative. Wow. A Delta spokesperson told HuffPost on Wednesday that an investigation into the incident is ongoing. The airline did not respond to questions about why the pilot did not notify air traffic control before releasing the fuel. LA County Fire and Los Angeles City Fire officials said paramedics treated nearly 60 students and adults for skin irritation or breathing problems at Park Avenue Elementary School, Tweedy Elementary, Graham Elementary, San Gabriel Elementary, 93rd Street Elementary, and Jordan High School after a plane released its fuel in southeastern Los Angeles County. None of the patients needed to be transported to a hospital, and there were no evacuation orders. All right. The lovely consequences of air travel. Moving on to this article about India shutting down its internet. I mean, there's quite a few countries that use shutting down the internet in order to control protests or control situations that are threatening to the government or the powers that be. So apparently there's been a situation in Kashmir. There's been, anti-government protests and strife, if you will, and they have shut down the internet, and it's obviously it makes it difficult for people to get or to give information. Is this a harbinger of, things to come? One can only wonder. I mean, they do soft censorship in the West, and a little more harder in the East. The Great Indian Internet Shutdown is the troubling future of protest control as India experiences the longest ever internet blockade. For democracy, more countries are pressing the internet kill switch to snub dissent. This is from January 22nd. When the internet went dark in northern Indian territory of Jammu and Kashmir on August 4th last year, photojournalist Junaid Bhatt assumed it was just the result of another clampdown. Muslim majority Kashmir has been in the midst of a 3-decade-long armed revolt against the Indian government, and the 12.3 million residents of Jammu and Kashmir have experienced over 175 such shutdowns since 2012. But the following day, India stripped Kashmir of its semi-autonomous statehood, detaining mainstream politicians and sending the region into a state of turmoil. The internet shutdown is still ongoing 5 months later. As Bhatt waited for services to be restored, he photographed the empty streets, the barricaded crossroads, the abandoned shops, and the vacant playgrounds of Srinagar, Kashmir's largest city, which was under paramilitary lockdown. Without internet access, he could not send reports back to his newsroom in Delhi, some 500 miles away. Eventually, he had no choice but to make the trip himself. He has been returning every week since, carrying his reportage on pen drives, all to circumvent the longest internet blackout ever seen in democracy. India has become the internet shutdown capital of the world, having imposed the blockade 373 times since 2012 and a record-breaking 106 times in 2019 alone. The government routinely blocks online access, citing public safety and national security reasons, but critics allege that the blackouts are meant to thwart dissent. But of course they are. Human rights. So, they cite public safety and national security concerns. So almost anything can be foisted upon citizens if it has the words public safety around it, or national security reasons. So anything can be censored, downplayed, hidden, controlled, etc. With a few little catchphrases from the government. Experts warn that the Kashmir shutdown is part of a trend of protest suppression that is rapidly gaining momentum across the world. According to a report published this month by Top 10 VPN, a UK-based internet research firm focused on digital privacy, 122 major internet shutdowns were reported in 21 countries last year. There were more internet shutdowns in 2019 globally than ever before, and at least a 10% increase in the number of shutdowns reported. That count doesn't even include instances of internet throttling, deliberate slowing, or speeding of service by an internet service provider through temporary blocks on social media and certain websites. The general trend is that shutdowns are typically imposed in response to popular protests and during important elections as governments try to forcibly quell civil unrest, says Samuel Woodhams, co-author of the report in Digital Rights lead at Top 10 VPN. Internet shutdowns are a simple, if ineffective, way to try to choke the flow of information whenever repressive governments are anxious about their grip on power. And it has happened here in the States. Mostly they just try to throttle people's access. I believe there was a report, I reported on that last year, surrounding the Paradise Fires, that people were having their internet throttled, or their mobile phone access throttled, for whatever reason, probably to slow the news getting out, things that were happening, to keep that controlled. But the firefighters had their access also throttled as well when they were trying to put out the fires, making it much more dangerous for them. So ineffective indeed, if not just downright dangerous. But it also is a way to stop any kind of alternative news or alternative news reporting. You probably, this is the wave of the future. You're going to see this ramp up more and more as situations kind of unravel around the world, whether it's around economic strife or climate change situations, or people just, waking up to what is happening in the world and wanting something different. Those in power are going to fight that tooth and nail. And I also want to cover this article today. U.S. drinking water widely contaminated with forever chemicals. Watchdog says, this is from January 22nd, some of the highest levels have been found in Miami, Philadelphia, and New Orleans, according to a new report. Contamination of U.S. drinking water with man-made forever chemicals is far worse than previously estimated. So thank God the Trump administration is rolling back water protections. That's going to help the situation immensely. But, that's awesome that he's doing such stupid things, because that means that people, that means that most likely he's not going to be here long. Too many people are concerned about this, and this is a growing concern by the day. The chemicals resistant to breaking down in the environment are known as perfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS. Some have been linked to cancers, liver damage, low birth weight, and other health problems. The findings here by the Environmental Working Group show the group's previous estimate in 2018, based on unpublished U.S. Environmental Protection Agency data, at 110 million Americans may be contaminated with PFAS, could be far too low. It's nearly impossible to avoid contaminated drinking water from these chemicals, said David Andrews, a senior scientist at EWG and co-author of the report. The chemicals were used in products like Teflon and Scotchgard and in firefighting foam. Some are used in a variety of other products and industrial processes, and the replacements also pose risks. Of tap water samples taken by EWG from 44 sites in 31 states and Washington, D.C., only one location, Meridian, Mississippi, which relies on 700-foot deep wells, had no detectable PFAS. Only Seattle and Tuscaloosa, Alabama, had levels below 1 part per trillion, the limit EWG recommends. In addition, EWG found that on average 6 to 7 PFAS compounds were found at the tested sites, and the effects on health and the mixtures are little understood. Everyone's really exposed to a toxic soup of these PFAS chemicals, Andrews said. In 34 places where EWG's tests found PFAS, contamination had not only been publicly reported by the EPA or state environmental agencies. The EPA had not been publicly reported, The EPA has known since at least 2001 about the problem of PFAS in drinking water, but has so far failed to set an enforceable nationwide legal limit. So, prior to Trump and all his mucking about, the EPA was not doing what they were supposed to be doing anyway. So, not saying that what he is doing isn't bad, but it was already bad before. He's just making it worse. The EPA said early last year it would begin the process to set limits on 2 of the chemicals, PFOA, PFOAS. The EPA said it has helped states and communities address PFAS, and in that it is working to put limits on the 2 main chemicals, but did not give a timeline. In 2018, a draft report from an office of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services said the risk level for exposure to the chemicals should be up to 10 times lower than the 70 parts per trillion threshold the EPA recommends. The White House and the EPA had tried to stop the report from being published. Of course they did. I don't know. Get a water filter would probably be a good idea. I don't know if I would trust bottled water necessarily, especially if it's bottled in plastic. So, probably your best bet is some form of water filter. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you'd like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.